So yeah, we are here to speak about supply chain attacks. So the talk will be about two cases we worked on last year, and we will explain you the two cases, the impact, and how a lot finally of company were compromised due to a supplier. And after we will have a small conclusion about our view of the next year and supply chain attacks. So it's basically just what I explained to you. So my name is Paul, and I'm working at Cisco Talos for close to 2 years now. I'm security researchers, mainly work on malware analysis, APT, or targeted attack, even if sometimes it's not so advanced. And I'm one of the organizers of BotConf, a conference in France. If you saw the talk of Sébastien this morning, I work with him on the organization and also volunteer. And here my colleagues.
Oh yeah, I do need this. I'll kick off first with it. Yeah, my name is Mercer. I work with Paul. I've been at Talos now around 3 years. Mostly working around malware hunting, malware analysis, reverse engineering, etc. So yeah, I run a conference called B-Side Belfast, which is in Belfast. If anyone wants to come visit, please let me know. If you want to speak, even better. So yeah, we'll get into this introduction. As Paul mentioned, we're going to talk today about supply chain attacks. So the whole notion of that is exploiting trust relationships that you share with either other companies or could be right down to an individual basis level. We're going to cover two different talks. First one, we're going to talk about a piece of ransomware called Netya, also called NotPetya. So we were one of the first people to discover this. Paul and I were one of the first people to work on this. Cisco IR, rather fortunately, was on site. So this was an attack that occurred in Ukraine. It was related to the financial documentation platform called MEDOC, which we'll get into a bit, but that's where it started. So we got a phone call, Cisco IR got a phone call and basically said something really bad's happening. Now that doesn't tell anyone anything. Something really bad happening is there's no real message in that. So we actually saw this on Twitter, and it was an actual tweet from the verified confirmed Ukrainian government account that said, some of our government agencies, private firms were hit by a virus. There's no need to panic. We're putting our utmost attack for the issues. So this was pretty funny, but when we actually get into it and find out what it was unfortunately not funny at all. So what we started with was, hello, something bad's happening from a customer perspective and what was going on. What we started to get information-wise was we were dealing with potentially a strain of ransomware. Appear to be targeting every organization in Ukraine. Every organization can be a bit sort of wishy-washy, but that seemed to be the consensus of the information we were getting. Effectiveness of it was compared to a flash flood, and by that we mean it was happening rapidly without any real time to respond and do anything about it. Currently, the infection and delivery vector were unknown. So that's great fun to be thrown into. It's like everything's broke, the world is burning, but we don't know how. Can you help us? Okay, no problem. So Cisco IR guys turn up on site, as you say, and anytime there's a Cisco incident response engagement, they will work directly with a Talos member or a Talos team. So Paul and I started looking at some of the stuff. We first try to figure out what MEDOC is. So it's a Windows.NET app, hateful programming language, but it's developed in .NET. It's a tax processing application used abundantly throughout the world, not only Ukraine. Auto-update functionality, which is good because we as security professionals constantly say, please patch your shit, if you don't, bad things will happen. Unfortunately, this was the opposite of that, it was the flip of that. Used in large companies, as I mentioned, and has now become the most famous company in Ukraine due to wrecking lots of other companies with it. You don't even? It's what, sorry? Okay. Get shouted at now, sorry. So communication-wise, what do we do? So as I mentioned, I'll start with a phone call. So whenever your provider are sending you messages to say, guys, you're doing a lot of international long-distance calling here, could you please stop? We basically started doing lots of excessive calls. And now I'm all tangled up, sorry. Hopefully that's better now. So AT&T were basically letting our IR guys know, you're spending too much money, stop phoning Ukraine. Why are you phoning Ukraine? So, turns out we actually needed to phone Ukraine. So we'll start with a timeline perspective. How did this all start? So April 2017, April 14, 2017, MEDOC released an updated platform. Auto-update functionality, as we mentioned, exists within the application auto-updates. May the 15th, they released another minor version release. Again, everything updates as you would expect. Unfortunately, this time there was a backdoor released with it. June 22nd came and there was another version released, again carrying the same backdoor. So we were quite confident that there was a backdoor in there to the point where we guaranteed it. So we started having to look back at what was going on from an update perspective and what was being carried out. So we started looking at the backdoor that we identified. So upd.medoc.com.ua was contacted every 2 minutes. Now that's the update server for Medoc, so that's fine, that's legitimate, that makes sense. What this backdoor did was have a 6-stage command process that it could actually issue and what it could do. So we had an email retrieval platform that was associated with it, that then waited for execution of commands that wanted to be carried out by the attacker. And at the end, we determined that these commands were actually used to help distribute NetJet, or NotPetya if you're not familiar with our terminology name. So the backdoor was simple. In reality, it started off by stealing SMPT credentials, so mail credentials, stored them in the registry, and started using them to actually do some communication back. You'll see, I think if this works. Yeah, there it is there. Yeah, so we started to see loading of different commands via run DLL on Windows boxes. So that's what we started to identify. We started trying to build the pictures of what's going on. We start with the Ukrainian tax document, as I mentioned. We have to figure out, right, well, what's it doing? How's it doing it? We basically start forming our own timeline at this point. So the Medoc timeline that we came up with, dated back to April 2017, as I mentioned. That's when we started seeing basically initial releases with backdoors included. June 27th was when it really got bad. That's the day that we got the phone call I mentioned at the start. So around 9 AM UTC, we see that malicious actor starts using stolen credentials to perform switch user commands on a privileged update server. Very rare. I don't know how many people log or look at things it contains in their bash, but looking for things like switch users on boxes that probably shouldn't be happening on is quite important. So you look out for things like this. So from an IR and response perspective, you're looking at what's being logged and where it's being logged to. 10 minutes later, I don't know why it took 10 minutes, it's quite early. Maybe it was time for coffee, I don't know, but he took his time. So 10 minutes later, he modified some of the server configuration that was being used to proxy the updates. This was proxied to a third-party hosting platform at the time. Logs then confirmed all proxy traffic was going through this third-party hosted platform. So the attacker now had the update server proxying all traffic through his own box. If you don't know if that's bad, I'm going to tell you right now, that's very bad. You no longer have control of your traffic, you no longer have control of your update mechanism. You're in a very bad place. So we start seeing what was going on there. At this point, as I say, this is a timeline we built after the fact, unfortunately not real time. Excuse me. So the last confirmed proxy connection that we seen in the logs was around 3 hours later, 12:31. Original server was then restored from a configuration perspective. We see a disconnected IP from a Latvian IP. I need to be very clear here, that does not mean this attacker was based in Latvia. False flag and attribution is a very, very different conversation that we can have happily after, but this does not mean this attacker was situated in Latvia. That is just where the box he was using came from. Third-party hosting provider then had their box wiped using a DD0 command. So this was dead. There was no way we could recover any more from that. So we built a timeline. We understood it was now ransomware at this point. We figured out how it was delivered. We figured out how it was actually perpetuating its commands around the infrastructure. So now we started to look at NetJet itself. It had worm capabilities, which is never fun in an organization that has connection outside of itself. Credential stealing, which again is never fun because the more credentials I have in your environment, the more I can move around your environment. And then ransomware. That's not fun because it's just really annoying because you can't get your own files back and that pisses everyone off. So propagation started like this. File drop called perfc.dat, and it contained everything that NetJet needed to run from an execution and propagation point of view. We have 4 methods of propagation. We'll step through each one of them. First one, we go through a command line theft using Mimikatz. Mimikatz is an awesome tool. However, if Mimikatz is on your network, it probably shouldn't be. So this is a tool to maybe keep an eye out for if you do have really good network logging, endpoint protection information, etc. Mimikatz is generally a well-recognized and well-regarded pen testing tool for stealing credentials out of memory and performing pass-the-hash type attacks, basically allowing me to move throughout your environment without needing any credentials. Credentials then get passed through the name pipe, and we see the malware uses all the collected token information to begin propagation. First step we see was some use of eternal glue as well. fact, you know what, let me go back and go over these. I thought I'd go over the slides and policies. WMI is a method that this malware used to try and propagate around itself. It's a legitimate, fully supported platform that exists within Windows. PSExec is a legitimate remote administration tool that attackers unfortunately will use. This is being referred to a lot now as living off the land binaries. This is where you can actually, from an attacker's perspective, break into an environment and use everything that's there already. PowerShell is an awesome example of this. PowerShell is included by default with every Windows client, and it's amazing for moving about. But WMI and PSExec are the same sort of idea. Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance are both SMB-based vulnerabilities that were released by shadow brokers, and unfortunately they're very effective. No one patched MS 17010. Well, not no one patched. This is the WannaCry issue. People didn't patch some of their infrastructure, so this allowed, even 4 months on from WannaCry, the network could still actually propagate around the environment. So regardless of the propagation methodology it uses, it scans the IP subnet of the box it's on, looks for vulnerable hosts that it can get into, and away we go. So Mimikatz, as we've just explained, and then some of the Eternal Blue modules, or sorry, Mimikatz modules that we were able to identify. Again, we can look at the code from a decompiled point of view. So you run the code in IDA and you can see what it's doing. You look at the Mimikatz GitHub, you can actually directly relate to the modules that are being used. So that's one way that you're able to point out what's going on and what it's trying to do. We've got more Mimikatz stuff, so bcrypt being used so we can identify some of the cryptgen symmetric key profiles and modules that are being used and functions that are being used. Then we get Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance and a modified platform with Double Pulsar. Double Pulsar is the backdoor that was used and released by shadow brokers. If you didn't have MS 17010 applied, basically you could carry out some modified command and response codes that would allow an attacker to have low-code execution on your remote host. Now what we get here is a modified Double Pulsar backdoor installed. It drops the perf.dat, and then the whole thing starts over again. Because it's a worm, it constantly tries to replicate and move around your environment. Double Pulsar modifications that happened were minimal. Sorry, the screen is a bit hard for me to see here, so I'm sort of trying to go to and from. But you'll see some of the different aspects. You'll see some of the commands. It's like byte level code. Could use a mouse. That's see you French people. Yeah, it's so smart. Yeah, you'll see the same paint command, etc. He's changed some of the bytecodes that are being used, but not enough to actually. Enough to make it a differentiation. So if you use any heuristic-based or signature-based scanning technologies, it would miss these because it's looking for that same bytecode or opcode information. Again, Double Pulsar allocations that we can see, it's the exact same. He's changed if you look at the move AL10H and move AL11H, so he's incremented 1 byte on each of the opcodes here. Again, enough to trick and fool some heuristic-based and signature-based platforms. And Double Pulsar modification again, this guy was busy clearly with Double Pulsar. This is some of the standard offsets that existed within the leaked code that's available for, unfortunately, anyone to download and use and wrap into their malware. Again, he's changed some of the bytecode responses. So Netja actually used its offset at 0x16, but the standard offset was 0x1e for multiplex ID. So it's the SMB traffic information that's being used. Propagation using PSExec. As I mentioned, PSExec is a really cool legitimate Windows tool. If you're a systems administrator, you possibly use this. Even if you're not, it's really useful to use in environments where you control and connect to multiple machines. What it did from a perfect.dat platform was drop PSExec as DLL host.dat, use the stolen tokens as we mentioned that were taken by things like Mimikatz, and then connect to a remote machine, run this command here. I'll use the mouse because it's easier. Basically, execute run DLL32exe and running perfect.dat, the malware as we talked about, with an ordinal, so an export of 01, which then kicked off the whole Netja ransomware. WMI was the exact same. Uses stolen information that we've taken, so potential harvesting is key for this piece of malware to actually move from a wormable point of view. Pass information across the name pipe using WMIC, which is part of WMI, and then use another process called create to run DLL32 and execute. You see the commonality, you see what he's doing. Encryption process. No matter what methodology you use to actually get into your infrastructure, so whether you use Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance, PSExec, or WMI, it's try to do privilege escalation of the current user. Once it did that, it created a scheduled task to create a reboot within 1 hour. Now, we don't really know why it did that. because there is no real rationale for it to wait an hour. It could have just rebooted the box straight away. Maybe they wanted to try and get additional information. We don't really know. There's nothing that exists within that malware that exfiltrates any useful information that they could have been waiting on. So yeah, we get a scheduled reboot. What happens in that scheduled reboot is the malware then will destroy the MBR on physical drive 0. So the first physical drive that is referenced within your environment will be physical drive 0. If it has some SE debug priv or SE shutdown priv from an API point of view, it will then destroy your MBR and wipe your disk. If it can't, it will destroy the first 10 disk sectors. It will then encrypt some of the files using RSA 2048. You're in a world of hurt from a ransomware perspective. All of your files will be encrypted. You can't boot the box because your MBR is hosed, and you're pretty much stuck. If you were lucky enough to get the box back up, the attacker actually had done some final log cleanup, and he tried to delete any notion of you being able to find him or any further information out. The payload that you see once you're rebooted, similar to Petya, if you're familiar with Petya, black background with red writing, basically telling you, come and pay me loads of money at this address and we'll give you your information back. Now the thing about this was, the attacker used a single address from a Bitcoin perspective, so he had no real way to actually determine who paid and who hadn't paid, very similar to WannaCry. The attacker then also used a single postio.net email here, so wosmith123456 at postio.net. Within probably an hour of this attack, Postio would shut that mailbox down. So even though if you wanted to pay, which you should never do, we'd never advocate paying over ransom, but even if you wanted to, you had no communication from the actor. Postio had, in my opinion, made the right move. They'd shut that platform down so the attacker wasn't able to use it or abuse it anymore. However, it then rendered this unable to pay. Genuine ransomware? Not really, in my opinion, because of some of the things we just talked about. Single Bitcoin wall makes it pretty much very difficult to track without having people sign addresses to prove where the payment came from, etc. Single email address, which was now blocked, as I mentioned, so you can't even talk to anyone. If you're an admin, your MBR is overwritten, you're already in a bad place if your MBR is overwritten. Even if your MBR wasn't overwritten, it wiped the first 10 sectors of your disk, so booting your disk became a problem. And if you had software avp.exe running, it also wiped the first 10 disk sectors, regardless of privilege. Does anyone know what avp.exe is? I do wish we had a prize that incentivizes people, but we don't. Yes? Kaspersky is right. So this malware actually looked specifically for Kaspersky, which might make sense with it being in Ukraine. We don't really know the motivation that was behind that, but if you had avp.exe running, it overwritten the first 10 sectors. So the malware basically went, I'm out, I'm done. I've wiped all your shit away. He was happy from his perspective.
Yeah, so as you probably understood, on this case, the purpose was to compromise the maximum number of machines. But by the way, for people up, there is some free space here if you want to sit.
Yeah, wiping that machine or hosting machines as quickly as possible is what Edge was designed for and what it actually did. From a financial point of view, there was at least, there were multiple companies that were impacted by this, but there were 2 companies that reported losses of over $300 million. Sorry, $300 million, so that's over $500 million from 2 companies, and that's only people who talked about it publicly. So mass destruction in a quick way to cause greatest impact.
Yeah. So, and in this new case, you will see it's the same approach, supply chain compromise and compromise of final targets. But the goal was completely different. In Warren case, the purpose was to compromise a maximum number of machines and generate buzz and media coverage, etc. In this case, it's more or less the opposite. The purpose was to compromise a maximum of machines, but after make some filter to limit on several specific really important machines from the attacker's point of view. So it's about CCleaner application. Who doesn't know CCleaner in the room? So everybody knows CCleaner? No? So next question, who already recommend to someone to install CCleaner? Yeah, some people are honest.
You people have to leave. Oh,
So CCleaner, for the only guys that don't know, is an application used to clean your system, clean your registry, have better performance, clean malware, hardware, and stuff like that. So it's screenshot from the website, not our number. So visibly, it's used by billions of people. It's downloaded massively. It's more or less every language, etc. So it's massively used. So it's normal that more or less everybody knows this application. So we received a notification about a weird behavior inside of a CCleaner application. So the first thing we do when we receive this kind of stuff, we look at the binary. We saw it's signed by Avast. The signature is valid, the binary was not modified, etc. So our first reaction is, yeah, maybe our engine have an issue, maybe it's a false positive, something really common. And we start to take a look at it to understand why we have a weird behavior. And we detected, in fact, malicious code inside of the legitimate binary. So the compromised version, the version with the malicious code, is the version 5.33 and cloud version 2. They have they maintain two different versions, but the same engine, the same binary more or less. And if you look on the changelog, what I'm going to speak today is a minor bug.
Very minor bug. Didn't notify many people at all.
And the fun thing is, if you look at the timeline, so here we have the minor bug, and 1 week after they revoke certificate. Minor bug, revoke certificate. So anyway, so something really interesting from a reverser point of view. I don't know if you reverse a lot of Windows binary, but generally the first thing you don't do is reversing runtime. Runtime is code added by compiler to manage thread and stuff like that. So basically you don't write this code, it's automatically added by Visual Studio for internal behavior. What did this attacker do? He modified runtime in order to jump on malicious code. So basically when you are reverser, you receive a legitimate binary signed and is 5 megabytes, you don't look for runtime, trust me. So in this case, the guy chose to work on runtime and really at the beginning of execution of the malware. He simply had a call inside of runtime to jump on malicious code. What is the purpose of the malicious code? It's not so big, it's even a little bit small. The purpose is simply to download additional stage and execute it. But you do it with a really specific way. So when CCleaner, the legitimate application, is run, runtime executed, the malware jump on the malicious part and continue the legitimate execution of CCleaner. So the application works as usual. He makes some techniques to detect if it's a VM or not. First, he makes some slips. He waits, delays. If the delay is modified, so if he waits, I think it's 600 seconds. If it's less, he decided it's a sandbox. The delay was decreased by sandbox. It's a common way to work for sandbox. Other thing, he checked the user privilege, because CCleaner must be run in admin. So if it's not run as admin, it's probably a sandbox or something not normal. So if it's not executed at admin, he stops execution. And if everything looks fine, he finally decides to contact server. And to do so, he has a really specific way. He tried to contact an IP, the IP on the slide. And if the IP doesn't reply, it was okay during investigation, the IP didn't work. So if it does not work, it generates a domain based on the month, the current month. And based on this domain, he makes DNS request. The DNS request gives 2 IP. He makes some XOR and byte manipulation to generate a 3rd IP, and this final IP will be the C2. So the point is, if you look at binary and you simply work statically, you see an IP, you say, yeah, I'm winner. No, in this case, it's more complicated. It generates domain, but this domain is not really used as CC. This domain is used to get 2 IPs and generate the final IPs. So it's really specific. It's not something common. Here is some domain generated for each month of last year. And here it's OpenDNS output to show you. You already have activities on this specific DGR. You have a request on this domain during 1 month, and the month after, it's 0, and the new domain was used. So you really can see the activities by month. So what is the purpose of the connection to the CC? The purpose was to register the machine, the compromise system, by giving some information such as install program, process list, this kind of information. We will see later exactly what kind of information I sent. If the machine was relevant for the attackers, he can decide to send a second stage to the machine, to the compromise system. So the second stage is a DLL. He used the same stuff. He used legitimate binary and patch legitimate binary with malicious code. But on Avast case, the binary was signed and the signatures was valid. So the attackers had malicious code before, during or before compilation of binary by Avast as it's signed. In this case, they simply patched binary, but the binary didn't have any signatures. So they don't think they compromise Corel or Symantec. It's not the case. They simply take the binary, patch them, and use them like that, contrary to Avast. And yeah, he stored the patch binary in registry, but it's not necessarily the most important. And he used exactly the same trick. He decided to work on a runtime. So he patched runtime of the binary to execute malicious code. So basically what reversal don't really take time to look at. You can have more information about this thing. Simply, if there is a reverser in the room, he uses small tricks, really fun, and he can make you crazy. Here on the left, you have IDA Pro capture, the graph view of IDA Pro. And if you look at the end, the function finished by a pop, and it's really unusual. If you reverse a lot of binary, it never finished by a pop. But if you switch in text view, you can see, in fact, it finished by a jump. So he used a feature of IDA. IDA used some specific section to identify the beginning and the end of a specific function, typically for runtime. And the guy modified to say to IDA, the section finished 1 byte before. And IDA in graph view forget to display to you the jump. But if you're working in text view, you can see the jump without any issue. We are safe. Radar is not impacted by this bug. Sadly, nobody uses radar. So, yeah, the purpose of this second stage was more or less the same as the previous one, download an additional payload. But instead of using DNS, get IP to generate an IP, he performed 2 queries on 2 legitimate websites, GitHub and WordPress, get information from these 2 websites, make some byte manipulation to generate a new IP. So the approach is the same, but instead of using DNS, it used 2 official legitimate websites. During our investigation, the page, these 2 pages and these 2 specific search on this website didn't give us any results. So we were not able to go on the next stage and on the next binary, but you can look on Google, Avast make some research and maybe found the next stage. But we didn't, so I won't speak about it. Yeah, so on the stage 1, there is a custom base64 function to encode and decode string. And I think it's Kaspersky or Intezas, I don't remember.
Kaspersky,
yeah. Identify that this specific custom base64 function was implemented exactly with the same way on a group named APT17 or group 72 for us. So what is this group? You can make some Google search about it, but it's alleged to be a Chinese hacker. So be careful because similarities, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. You must be pretty careful. Base attribution on few opcode is not always a good idea, but anyway, it's just a fact. So that's for the malware part. And something really interesting, maybe the most interesting part, we had access to a command line control, and we were able to make investigation on the database of this C2 and the information, the people compromised, etc. So it's really easy. It's simply a PHP website, no rocket science, with a MySQL database. Something that is pretty clever from my point of view. CCleaner modifies the binary use a specific request like post and stuff like that to connect to C2. And if you don't contact the server with exactly the good way, if you perform get instead of post, if you do this kind of thing, it will automatically redirect you to Piriform, the company that creates CCleaner. So imagine you have suspicion, you are analyzing this stuff, you find a weird connection to this weird domain. If you go on your browsers, you put the domain, you will redirect to Piriform, the developers of CCleaner. So you will say, oh yeah, it's Piriform website, it's not malicious. So it's clever. Here is the configuration file. So you have username for database, the password, the time zone. So obviously I can put PRC if I want on my server. PRC is a Chinese time zone. And you've got DLL name is a path of the second stage. So GUI setup is the second stage pushed on machines that interest attackers. Here is the database creation and request. If you are good in SQL injection, you could probably see an SQL injection. And here is a shellcode executed on a machine to download the second stage. Okay. The most interesting part is this code. So when a machine is compromised with a stage 1, so billion of machine potentially, the machine send install application, running process, etc. But the machine sent its IP, and the machine sent the domain from Active Directory point of view, the domain where the machine is bind. And the attackers implement 2 filters based on this information. So the first filter is based on domain. So basically, if the machine has this specific domain, I send the stage 2. And the second filter based on IP. If the compromised machine has this IP, I send the specific stage 2. The IP was not used on this server, but the domain was used. We found a domain on the configuration, and this domain is the organization, company, entities that interest this specific actor. Here is the list of the domain that the attacker was looking for. So if CCleaner is installed on the machine and the machine is bind to one of these domains, the attackers specifically automatically send the stage 2. See, your machine is not bind on one of these domains. Your machine was compromised by stage 1. It makes some request every day to the C2 to see if a second stage is ready for it, but that's all. You are compromised, but you don't download additional payload. If you are one of these domains, you will receive additional payload. So as you can see, it's mainly IT company. Yeah, it's IT company. So this attackers, this group, this guy, is mainly interested by IT company. He compromised really a lot of machine, but after he did a small filter on a really specific target. So if you look at the database, you have 3 tables. A table named servers. This table contains all the machines compromised by stage 1. So all machines where CCleaner, this specific version was installed. The OK table was the table where you have machines that receive the stage 2. So basically, machine bind to this domain. And get was empty. I did some statistics about the machine, the number, etc., the OS location, blah, blah, blah. But keep in mind, it's only 4 days of data because the attackers had some issue because life is hard. And 4 days before the acquisition, he lost his machine due to file system full. So he had to reinstall everything and start the DB, and that's why we only have 4 days. I think he was a victim of his success. He didn't expect so many data in database, so many compromised machine, and finally didn't pay enough and this full. And it's only one server on the 5 we identified. We did not get access to the 5 servers. The table. the server table. So yeah, it's basically what I said to you: an ID to the machine, IP address, Windows version, process list, is it admin, hostname, domain name. Domain name is from Active Directory point of view, MAC address, software, blah blah blah. Here is an example of data. You can guess it's a Chinese machine, and you have a list of application, running process, etc. You have the OK table. This one is more interesting because it contains all machines that receive the second stage, so all machines that the attackers is really interesting. And at this exact time where we have the database, we know that he sent the second stage and take control of 25 machines. So it looks like a lot, but no, it's not 25, it's a bit less. But anyway, it's not a lot compared to the global machine you will see just after. But a little bit more than 20 machines receive the second stage. So if we look from the statistic point of view, I count the number of total machines in the database, and we are more than 800,000 systems. So the guy had access to almost 1 million machines, and he decided to compromise only 20, a little bit more than 20. So he has a really, really big botnet of machines at this time in 4 days. Other point, it's hard to identify. CCleaner is used by a lot of individual users at home. And my goal was to identify company, organization, etc., and to separate this kind of profile and end users. I don't have a magic way to do it, so the technique I use, I simply decided to check if the machine is bound to a domain. I estimate that at home you don't have domain. And if I use these techniques, I can count how many machines are bound to domain, so how many machines I estimate it's corporate machine. And in this case is 41,000 machines. So this is, from my point of view, it's not sure 100%, but more or less, the number of corporate machines compromised by this guy with stage 1 and potentially a stage 2 later if he wants. I make some other query, and typically I would like to know if some domain had a lot of compromised machines. So in this case, you have the output of the count by domain. So typically a specific domain, a specific organization, entity, company has 960 compromised machines in his organization by that specific domain. And after 700, etc. So some organization had a lot of work because they had a lot of compromised machine with this CCleaner version installed during our investigation. I'll make some statistics about operating system, but it's simply a projection of life. You have a lot of Windows 7, you have some Windows 10 and Windows XP, so it's simply to represent life, I think. Simply. But with domain, we can make some more fun requests. Typically here, I was looking for domain containing .gov, and I got 500 machines from domain containing .gov. Or same thing with bank, 51. So this machine have a bind on domain named gov something or bank something. Right, something a little bit more dangerous. I check on install software on machine. And the first query, I was looking for if some machine have PLC simulator installed. And I found 200 machines compromised by stage 1 with a PLC simulator. So PLC is for SCADA system, industrial stuff. And in this case, it's simulators. So it's probably developers on this kind of profile that are compromised by CCleaner. Another one, the second one is I was looking for machines that have Modbus installed on them. And I got more than 200 machines with Modbus application installed. And Modbus protocol supported by the OS. It means that people that work more or less on this kind of domain, PLC or industrial stuff. And the last one is probably the worst query. The first one was PLC simulator, so to simulate and develop. And the last one is monitoring. So I got 9 machines compromised with application used to monitor PLC, to monitor SCADA system, industrial stuff, etc. And in this case, the attacker had access to 9 machines with PLC monitoring system installed. Luckily, on our dump list, all this machine only received the stage 1. So the attackers was not interested by this machine at this time. It was here, maybe for later, maybe he will never use it, but it was here. Yeah, this morning I decided to make some Canadian statistics, just for you, exclusivity. So I identify close to 14,000 infected systems with IP based in Canada, all Canada. We make some search on Active Directory domain and 300 domain contain.ca on the domain. Globally, it represents 1.6% of infection, but the difference between each is really small. I think the first one represents 3%. So it's 3, 2.9, 2.8, etc. So everybody is really close. And it's 90th most popular country in the C2 infrastructure. So a lot of machine. Sorry. So conclusion, the 2 cases are completely different on the purpose. On Warren case, the purpose, as I said, was to compromise the maximum of machine and go destroy everything, basically. And in my case, secret case, the purpose was to compromise the maximum of machine, but to send the payload, the final payload, on really specific targets. You can see the list; it's really specific. But if we didn't identify this behavior inside of CCleaner application, the guy could keep this botnet during years and choose target, change the profile, etc. It's really well designed, and you can easily change everything on demand. Speaking more globally about supply chain attack, we did more or less the same talk previously, and we had the first question, how we can be protected about supply chain attack. And I think I will have the same question. So our answer, it's really complicated, and we don't have any answer. Typically, if we look at NetCat case, this kind of thing, if you have a really separate network without, not a flat network where everything is in the same place, your Medoc application will be compromised, will be encrypted, but the malware won't be able to propagate inside of your network. So if you limit your network on really specific business with few machines, etc., and you have a correct network design, you can mitigate or limit the impact of this kind of compromise. For CCleaner, it's completely different. You don't have propagation, and it's one-shot install. And in this case, it's more take care of what you install. It looks stupid, but it's a fact. And it's not because it's a freeware, it's not because it's massively used, it's not because they have a good reputation that you can install it everywhere like that just because. And in this case, I think the CCleaner case was more complicated to identify because the binary sign, you can trust provider, you could have a contract. I think they have a pro service and they sell the application, etc. And in this case, it's really complicated to identify. And to be honest, I don't have strict rules to help you in supply chain attack. And it's what is really scary. Because you trust your provider, I'm pretty sure you are not able to count the number of providers you have. You have 100,000 different providers. And for us, it's really complicated. It will be more complicated with time because we have more and more providers. And the infrastructure is more and more complex. And this kind of stuff can stay during years because simply if this application is really used by a lot of people. So we can be lucky and a researcher will find it at the end. But if it's a provider, more exclusive with a really specific application and only few customers, it could take a lot of time before security researchers take time to look at it and find something.
Yeah, you're building botnets at a rate of 800,000 hosts in 4 days. I mean, if that guy, if that individual, person, group, malicious actor, whatever we want to call them, had have changed what they wanted to do with that botnet, I mean, 4 days, 800,000 botnet, that's more, it is more cadence in botnets like Neckers, which is one of the biggest and most highly regarded email spam platforms in the world. We could have done whatever we wanted with it. We had wanted to mine XMR, cryptocurrency, he'd be a millionaire, and as Paul said, we found it, but it doesn't necessarily mean someone else would have. We found it looking at, we were doing some beta testing on a new engine platform, which is how we identified it. Had we not been doing that, then we potentially wouldn't have found it, because obviously CCleaner hadn't found it at the time. How that came to fruition was CCleaner had been bought over, Avast had purchased a company called Periform, and unfortunately they had acquired a breach as a service at that point, which is not good. And that's something you also need to be aware of as well. If you're working acquisition type stuff, you are a trusted supplier at the end of the day. You need to be sure that the people you're bringing into your network or into your infrastructure is someone you trust. That's very hard to do. As Paul said, we definitely don't have the right answer, so don't ask us, we won't do what to tell you. But yeah, we, as the last slide says, we felt a disturbance in the supply chain, so we hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please ask.